Hi there, my name's Haley. I use she, her pronouns, and today I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about coercive dynamics and intimate relationships, specifically with a focus on sexual and reproductive coercion. There is some sexually explicit content in this video, so if you're under the age of 18, I ask that you just bookmark it and come back to it on your birthday if you're feeling like you want to learn a little bit. And for everybody else who is going to continue watching, I just want you to know that there is some potentially triggering information and scenarios in this presentation, so please take care of yourself. There's obviously no pressure to continue watching if it's upsetting to you. I just really wanted to do this presentation because I really care about these topics, and I think we need to bring a greater awareness because these do happen to a lot of people. And if you are able to stick it out until the end of the presentation, I'll be talking about recommendations and advancements in the field, also some basic strategies that you can use or pass on to someone if you know that they're going through any of these things. With that being said, let's get started. The questions I want to explore today are: what is violence and who are considered intimate partners? How has violence been socially constructed in our culture, and what does this definition tell us about how to respond to it? How do methods of violence change depending on who's in the relationship? How does the method used influence the way violence is experienced? What the purpose of these behaviors is? What reasons are that someone might not want to seek help for it? And is it our place to judge? Spoiler alert, it's not. So for the purpose of this presentation, I'm defining an intimate partner as a person with whom one has a close personal relationship with. So yes, this could be your spouse, your boyfriend, girlfriend, significant other, but this could also be a family member. This could be someone you're seeing, hooking up with, casually dating, a one-night stand. This could be a sex worker and a client, a landlord and a tenant, any relationship where there is a differential power dynamic and a close relationship. I'm defining violence as the intentional use of power to exert control in ways that have the potential to cause harm. So one key thing I want to point out is I did not use the word physical in this definition. There are many forms of violence that go beyond physical. For reproductive coercion, it's historically been a very heteronormative term. So for this, I'm defining it as behavior that intends to exercise power and control over another person's body, specifically the sexual and reproductive system. So even if you're not in a heterosexual relationship, you can still be affected by reproductive coercion, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later. But everyone has a sexual organ and reproductive system. So we're going to dive into that a bit later. As far as sexual coercion goes, this is behavior that is intended to compel the partner to engage in unwanted sexual activity. Now, we can't talk about any form of violence without talking about our culture and the systems that influence it. Obviously, this isn't a whole comprehensive list of things and reasons why violence is perpetuated in our culture, but I think for this form of violence, these are the main three culprits. So capitalism, we know, cannot exist without social inequity and power differentials. It values ownership and productivity, and it often uses exploitation as a primary means to achieve this goal. So how does capitalism play out in relationships? Let's think about people who are infertile, for instance. How might this be used against them in their intimate relationship? And also, what does capitalism tell us about our inability to produce? Sex negativity. We know that heteronormativity is the gold standard when it comes to this. Other types of relationships aren't valued, and that goes beyond sexual orientation and includes compulsory monogamy. And unfortunate byproducts of sex negativity that also impact our culture are biphobia, transphobia, fat phobia, and kink shaming, which we will dive into in greater context later on. And while masculinity itself is not inherently bad, toxic masculinity does influence these kind of behaviors that we're going to be talking about today because it adheres to strict gender roles, oftentimes in ways where aggression is used as a form of conflict resolution, and any form of power sharing, mutual respect, or intimacy is often seen as threatening and undesirable. So, in terms of the magnitude of this issue and what happens as a result of reproductive coercion, we know that it impacts our health, our physical health, mental health, sexual health, all of it. People in relationships where coercive behaviors are happening have, on average, a much higher percentage of STI infections, miscarriages, unintended pregnancies, and we also see different varied mental health conditions depending on what tactic was used. So, for example, if a rape happens, we know that oftentimes that will trigger a mental health condition. As far as other forms of coercion, we might see if children are used, we might see anxiety, depression. We might also see varying different psychological stressors, even if it doesn't trigger an actual diagnosis of a disorder. And I bring this up because I don't think we need to see it as a problem only if it meets the criteria for a diagnosis. It is a problem regardless. And as far as unintended pregnancies and abortions go, there's much research out there that shows that there is a strong correlation between intimate partner violence and the number of abortions sought and received. So 25% of young women in high school reported that their partner was intentionally trying to get them pregnant. So this might be they're refusing to wear condoms, they're telling them, I want to get you pregnant, I want you to have my baby, even when this conversation has already happened and they don't want it. This might also be contraceptive control and birth control sabotage, which I'll provide some more examples on later. As far as abortions go, oftentimes there is a ridiculously high rate of people who are receiving abortions who are also pregnant as a result of reproductive and sexual coercion. And so it is their only way out of being trapped in a relationship. So these are some of the different behaviors that I'm talking about when I say sexual and reproductive coercion. So trapping, which I'm defining as purposefully becoming pregnant or adopting children for the purpose of keeping a partner in a relationship. So this happens to, if we're going to use the gender binary, both male and female partners. You might see a male partner who is economically more well off, and his female partner might get pregnant on purpose for the intent of keeping him in the relationship, whether he wants to or not. We also see this on the flip side with male partners who are trying to trap their female partners into staying with them by keeping them pregnant, especially if they're dependent on their income or other resources they might have. Then we also have outing, which is sharing sensitive information about a partner without their consent. So this can be both identity or behaviorally based. So identities might be if a person is LGBTQ and has not come out yet, that like sharing that information without their consent and knowledge would be outing, but also behaviorally based if a person has a fetish or some kind of kink, and to shame or just humiliate them, this is shared without, again, their knowledge or consent. Commitment manipulation, which is using social scripts of commitment to influence a partner's behavior. So this might be when a partner says, if you loved me, you'd have sex with me, when you're not feeling like doing that. That is an example of commitment manipulation. We also see pregnancy pressure, behaviors intended to force or coerce a pregnancy to occur when it is unwanted. So this kind of also goes along with the idea of trapping. Specifically, this might be threatening or actually using physical violence. If a partner articulates that they don't want to get pregnant, it also looks like constant nagging and persistent begging. Birth control sabotage, which is destroying or removing. Also withholding different methods of contraception. This could be flushing birth control pills. This could be poking holes in condoms, removing patches and IUDs. This can look a lot of different ways depending on what your life looks like. Using children, using real or threatened violence against them to make a partner do something. If you don't have sex with me, I'll take the kids and you'll never see them again. This also can look like turning children against the other partner, manipulating them into doing something to feel shame. Pregnancy outcome control, which is where a partner might force you to either keep or terminate a pregnancy, regardless of what you would like to do, and then using that as fuel for emotional abuse. Sexual assault, which is any kind of sexual contact without mutual consent. We also have defection threats, which are threatening to abandon the relationship or break previously agreed upon boundaries. So this might look like if your partner says, well, others will have sex with me if you won't. That would be breaking the previously agreed upon boundaries of like, we're only going to have sex with each other if you are in a committed monogamous relationship, something like that. Stealthing, which is removing condoms during intercourse without consent for the purpose of getting someone pregnant. Resource gatekeeping, restricting access to healthcare services, community supports, and economic assets, which could be if a partner is on your health insurance, cutting them off of that, which impacts their sexual and reproductive health care. This can also look like if a person, has a support group or a community organization that they really like, whether it's, LGBTQ positive, kink affirming, whatever it is, keeping them from that support. And economic assets as well, which is like financial withholding, or if a person needs transportation to get to their appointments, this would be not allowing them to access that. And we have sexual shaming, which is degrading or humiliating a partner for their sexual needs, desires, identities, and or preferences with the intent to cause actual emotional pain. So this is not like the kink sexual humiliation. This is actually like saying transphobic slurs, homophobic slurs. This would be shaming someone about their body size or image, like for the sole purpose of causing them harm and emotional pain. Going beyond to talk about other identities and how these things might be specifically used, now that you know the general buckets, if you will, of behaviors, someone's age, what this might look like is invalidating adolescent or elder sexuality by making decisions about their sexual health because you see them as unfit to make their own judgment call. Gender, this might be destroying someone's hormones if they're in the middle of transitioning or intentionally misgendering them on purpose. Citizenship status, this might look like distorting or refusing to share information about their basic rights and eligibility to receive services, or withholding resources in exchange for sex. This is often what we call survival sex. So if a person just immigrated here and they don't really have a lot of connections or things, kind of like coercing sex in that way by providing resources, and also by the distorting and refusing to share information that's accurate, for example, threatening to call ICE and have them deported if they don't do what you want or something like that, is the way that this might look in a sexual context. Socioeconomic status could be purposefully passing STIs and restricting their access to treatment due to economic conditions, transportation, anything like that that is inhibited. It can also be threatening to cut your partner off health insurance benefits that they really need. Within the kink community, this can also look a lot of different ways, like attempting to use consensual violence as a scapegoat. Oh, well, you let me hit you in the bedroom, so why can't I do it here? That is a huge red flag, as well as resistance and apprehension to negotiate before sex, failure to follow through with the appropriate aftercare, and not respecting someone's safe words. And parenthood. So this might be threatening to call Child Protective Services when there's no actual threat or problem, tampering with someone's adoption process solely for the purpose of manipulating their behavior, turning children against the partner, and also using infertility as an excuse to shame someone into doing something. So what can we do? This is actually a pretty new issue in the field. It's probably always been around, but we're just now becoming more aware of it because, as I mentioned earlier, historically, the field has viewed this as only a heteronormative issue. And it's also been more common with like technological advancements and sex positivity as a movement coming into space. So universal healthcare, we need to continue to advocate for this because it would allow a greater amount of people to access universal screening and safety planning, as well as accessible mental health and contraceptive counseling, which can mitigate some of the effects that we saw, those negative health outcomes from earlier. Sex education in schools, specifically comprehensive sex education, because it helps create a healthy sexual culture. It teaches boundaries, consent, communication strategies, and also this really awesome thing called pleasure, which we don't talk about. If we just teach people from an abstinence-only perspective, how are they ever supposed to know what a pleasurable, happy, healthy relationship looks like? Sex education is violence prevention, hashtag it. Survivor-centered advocacy is pretty new. This is where a helping partnership is solely to promote self-determination and increase safety for the behavior that is being experienced. And this respects and works towards what the survivor wants. So this is different from service-centered advocacy, which is, you know, a bunch of gatekeeping and a lot of, well, we'll give you this service if you do this or if you meet these criteria. No, it meets the survivor where they're at, and that is the framework we need to be working towards as a profession. And also, even if you're a friend, take that into consideration. You don't have to be a professional to use survivor-centered advocacy. And lastly, harm reduction strategies. Obviously, and unfortunately, there's not a fix-all to all of these behaviors. It is a really expansive problem, but harm reduction acknowledges and accepts that violence does occur, but it works to mitigate the harmful effects rather than see them as solely unsolvable. So an example of a harm reduction strategy might be if someone is experiencing pregnancy pressure or they feel like their partner might be trying to trap them, getting a copper IUD. Birth control in general might not be enough, but a copper IUD could potentially, it is very effective. It's over 99% effective, but a copper IUD would not be felt by the partner, and it also would continue to let the person menstruate so that the partner wouldn't be suspecting that they're on birth control. And for my friends who are sex workers, you could charge less for sex with a condom as an incentive to have protected, safe sex to reduce your risk of STIs. So these are my references. I believe my email is going to be in the description box below. If anyone has any questions, comments, concerns, you just want to talk, anything, you are more than welcome to reach out to me. Thank you again for watching this video. I hope you learned something, and yeah, have a great day.